With the mission to keep as many men on as many guns for as long as possible, we call him Doc. Welcome to Combat Vet Vision. Now your host, Aaron Chief Seaver.
Hey, welcome to Combat Vet Vision. Hey, this is where I get to talk about my opinions, my life story. It's here to educate the public, help the combat vet that might be out there dealing with some things. And luckily I have guests on, and this time I got Chris Little, United States Marine, United States Army now, but gone through some injuries, gone through a lot of different things. Just did a deployment not too long ago during the COVID. Has all kinds of information about that, and he's an avid car guy, upholstery. A whole bunch of cool things. I mean, he's done some high-end upholstery for Ferraris, different things of that nature. But he's always a go-getter, a really not a victim, a guy who fought the med board, really pushed for a lot of different things. But he was injured in combat. He could get out on a med board and did some cool things. But he's staying in. He's doing his thing, and he's pushing hard. So, hey, Chris Little, thanks for being here, brother.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Chief. Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah. So you just did a transition, and you got a wild transition story. You got a pretty cool story in general, but we'll get into the transition part too. I mean, you went all the way from California to Pennsylvania at this point. You're staying close to your kids. You're involved in your family's life. You're pushing a lot of really cool different angles. You're a member of Warrior Built. You've been to PTSD Foundation's warrior groups. You're an all-around guy that's really collected and really been advocate for yourself about taking care of yourself and really pushing forward in some positive directions. So, yeah, talk about it a little bit, man. Talk about your Marine Corps career and how that all went.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's we'll hit the wave tops, but we'll start at the beginning. So, graduated high school in 2004. Could have came in straight out of high school when I was 18, but to be 110% honest with you, you couldn't, like a lot of 18-year-olds, you couldn't tell me the sky was blue when I was 18. So the thought of like this other man like yelling and screaming in my face day in and day out, tell me like how the world worked and what I was going to do, it really wasn't my thing. However, that took me down like a unique road. And so I went to Wildtech, graduated Wildtech in 2005. I got the call to go down to Raleigh, North Carolina and take my first upholstery gig. Started working in an upholstery shop. Did that for a couple years, and then woke up one morning, kind of got a wild hair, and I was out for a run. I ran past the recruiter station. I was like, you know what? I always wanted to be a Marine, because growing up with my father, he was in the Army. He did 4 years. He was a combat heavy engineer. And the one thing he always talked about was, I got jump wings. I got jump wings. So crazy old me thought I was going to join the Marine Corps. I was going to get me some jump wings. Turns out that's not how that works. So actually enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2008. Ended up going to boot camp down in Parris Island. Did really good. Ended up being a squad leader. Got meritoriously promoted out of boot camp. Got to the fleet, and honestly, I did exactly what they told me to do. Yell louder than everybody else, move faster than everybody else, and you're gonna be just fine. Turns out, at the beginning stages, if you just listen, yell, and move, you're gonna be great. So I actually ended up doing really well. And I don't know if it was because I was a little bit older, because I was 22. I just figured out like, hey, the easiest way to get through this period of like being the new guy is to listen and do what you're told. But that worked out really well for me. It worked out extremely well. I got meritoriously promoted to corporal in like 2.5 years. I was an 0341, 1st Battalion, 6th Marines. Ended up going on my first deployment to Afghanistan in 2010. I was part of the initial insertion into Marj, Afghanistan with 1-6. That was pretty good. My welcome to Afghanistan was a 13.5-hour firefight. Pretty much saw everything you could ever want to see in one day. So all of us that get in, we want to go to war, we want to do stuff. I pretty much got my filling of that on one day, but it didn't end there. That was about, I want to say that was a 6 or 7 month deployment. We were over there, and then we got ripped out in June. Actually, I left on my birthday, which was, hell yeah, birthday present to me. So that was good. And then we got back stateside, did a bunch of good training. I started out with Bravo Company 60s, so 60 millimeter mortars. I was a gunner. Then I ended up being the FDC chief because after we got back from that first deployment, I went to my advanced school, mortar leaders course. So I ended up in the FDC for a little bit. And then I got moved over to 81's platoon because they saw the value of me being the FDC chief and just the fact that I was kind of like locked on, knew my stuff, and just, again, just, didn't make a career out of kissing people's butts, just made a career out of being really good at my job. So I went over to 81's platoon. We would deploy again. This time I got attached. Weapons company kind of got mangled up a little bit. So 81s weren't necessarily 81s. Machine guns wasn't necessarily machine guns. So they created a MAP platoon, mobile arms platoon, and they grabbed up a bunch of 0311s, mortarmen, machine gunners, and it was just kind of like this motley crew of people. And we were supposed to roll around in trucks. That was a pipe dream. Like, everything in my story has nothing to do with riding in a truck, let me tell you. I kind of still fantasize about the day I get to ride in a truck and not hike with ridiculous amounts of weight on my body. So anyway, we trained in trucks out in 29 Palms, so that was kind of nice. But then we deployed. We went to Sangin. So everybody's heard the story. Most likely, if they're a veteran, especially in the Marine Corps, 3-5 was in Sangin. 3-5 did awesome work, but it was a hell of a deployment. And then 1-5 took over for them. Well, we swooped into Sangin after 1-5, and then recon. I don't even remember which recon it was. Maybe 3rd recon was up to the north. And we only did about half the deployment in Sangin because we moved up to Gajaki. Now, Sangin for us, 3-5 obviously got the brunt of it. 1-5, got a healthy portion of it. And then by the time we got there, it honestly was a whole lot of toe popping, leg breaking, or just mangling the body IEDs. So it was literally like walking around in a minefield. So psychologically, I can see how that wore down on a lot of the guys. There was a lot of people losing limbs, single amps, double amps. There was a couple KIA, and most of it was due to suicide bombers or those IED explosions, not so much kinetic as far as like man-on-man firefights. But we got up to Gajaki, and then kind of the tide shifted a little bit. We pushed across the river, the Helmand River, and that's kind of like when all hell broke loose. I was able to support on that deployment with mortars, a lot like I did in Marja. I shot tons of mortars, and not to backtrack, but I got to the fleet. I hit the fleet, and they're like, "Oh, you're never going to use your mortar system. It's like you're never going to get that thing out of the armory." And turns out we were some working ass mortarmen, let me tell you. So finished up that deployment. That was good. Ended up re-enlisting while I was in country. Everybody told me to, forget the bonus, like avoid the Op 4 program, which is to stay with the Victor unit for another 2 years, like the plague. But I went ahead and did it because like my heart truly is in the infantry, and kind of like coming up in the story, like you're going to see where that statement comes full circle. So I did the Op 4 program, and then I would go ahead and deploy again on the 2-2 Mu, part of Battalion Landing Team 1-6. That was in 2014. That Mu started out relatively slow. 81s got turned into the Trap Force, Tactical Recovery of Aircraft and Personnel. I was the security lead for that. But then we got dirt deaded in Kuwait for a little bit, and that ended up actually being a really good gig because we got attached to be in support of ODA when they went out for a mission in Baghdad. So we actually got to go to Baghdad for a little bit and just kind of hang out. We had a hairy ride on an Osprey that lost an engine. Turns out when they lose an engine, they can still fly, but they can't land soft. So we broke a bunch of stuff on the flight line coming in, took off again, came in the second time and broke a bunch more stuff. So we went to Baghdad in 2 birds. We went back to Kuwait in 1 bird. So that was a pretty wild ride. Then on that deployment, tail end of that deployment, right before we got home, since I was a mortarman, I always wanted to be like a forward observer. But I realized from some of my previous deployments, like I had met, 0861s, forward observers, JTACs, JFOs, stuff like that. And I realized like the only way I could actually be an actual school trained observer was to wield the artillery MOS of 0861. So I went ahead, I lap moved. Shortly after I lap moved on that deployment, I came back, found out I was in zone for staff sergeant. At this time, I did some OJT with 11th or 10th Marines, 10th Marines over in Camp Lejeune, Division FSCC. I went off to school. I went to Fort Seal for a month and then Coronado for naval gunfire for a month. Ended up being the dual honor grad out of both schools. So I didn't score the highest in either of the schools, but overall I scored the highest out of both of the schools. So that was good. So I appreciated, my opportunity to not only lap move, but then to, far exceed the expectations of, everybody in the artillery community thinking, here we go, here's another grunt, thinking they can play with cannons. So I did that. I got back to 10th Marines. I was super excited at that point. I was going to do some work with 10th Marines. That was short-lived. I got orders to deploy with the 2-2 MU again in support of Battalion Landing Team 16, but I went over to be the assistant fires chief for the command element. I did that. We did a little bit of a workup. I kind of got there late. 2016, we deployed again. So 2016 was actually a pretty wild deployment as far as MUs go. We got orders to support Northern Africa, so CERT Libya. ISIS became a big thing. So ISIS became like really started catching traction, I want to say in like 2014. So like when I was in Baghdad, we probably could have influenced a little bit, but I don't think our orders were to, really do much with that. So we didn't. Now 2016, this kind of came full circle again. And we had our opportunity to finally, give ISIS a piece of our mind. So it was a lot of support with aircraft, and dropping bombs and, using UAS and stuff like that. And then kind of where I fall into the whole puzzle of things is I actually ended up kind of unofficially taking over as the fires chief, especially being a new guy in artillery. Like, I mean, yeah, I went to school and I knew how to be an observer and all that stuff. I was not as senior as, some of the people that were purist in the artillery community. So I kind of had to, like, this was my opportunity to like really step up to the plate, and kind of like show the arty community and just the Marine Corps overall, like what I was capable of. So stuck on ship, sitting there one night, and a gentleman came in, dressed in civvies. So you can imagine like what his job was. But he's like, "Hey bro, can you fire naval guns?" And I was like, "Yeah, can you get me approved?" And this mysterious man disappears. And he comes back, he's like, "How long is it going to take?" I was like, "I don't know, am I approved?" He's like, "Yeah, you're approved." I was like, "Give me 5 minutes." So within that 5-minute window, I was able to reach out to the destroyer that we had in support of us, get those guys spun up. And lucky for me, I had been doing some dry fire training with these guys anyhow, just kind of like bust and rust, standard issue stuff. Realized that the Navy, as much as I love those guys, they don't practice the naval gunfire as much as the artillery guys do, at least on their end. So I was able to get them spun up, kind of like the plan and whatnot. And then I was able to support, combat operations in CERT Libya for 30 consecutive days. Ended up becoming the first person to do that since the Gulf War. You can imagine the surprise on my face when somebody tells you you're the first person to do something in like 2 decades. I was like, you're full of shit. And then they gave me a Navy comm, and I was like, all right, maybe there's some truth to this. So I started doing some research, and because of that, since then, I do believe there's been a couple other people that have gotten an opportunity to pop tops on naval guns, and kind of in the artillery community, like everybody wants to be a JTAC. But the one thing everybody lacks is like they never get to control like a destroyer in support of combat operations. So that was like a huge point in my career. I mean, there was tons of great things I did, tons of great guys I worked with, good teams. I was super spoiled in the infantry because I had like the greatest leadership in the world. Captain Sparks, comes to mind. He was our CO when I first got to the fleet. That guy was just an absolute savage. Nothing but respect for that man. Even my platoon commander, Anthony Piccioni, like he actually lives up here close to me in Evansburg, Pennsylvania. That guy, he was not your typical lieutenant. Like this guy, I mean, he was super motivated, but he wasn't really trying to reinvent the wheel. He was just trying to beauty in the basics, like just be super good at doing your job. So fast forward back to, after the naval gunfire, we got back from that deployment in 2016, made it home, got off the bus, probably made it 25 feet. And a buddy of mine, Nunez, gives me a high five. He's like, "Hey, congrats, bro. You got orders to Cali." Again, the surprise on my face was, probably unbelievable, because I was like, how do you know I have orders to California? And, I don't know. So anyway, I double tapped it and found out I was going to 1Y1, his first MLG, is what that is, over in Camp Pendleton. So I packed up the car, packed up, the wife and kids, and we headed west. But so myself, my wife, and my two daughters at the time, we went out to California, got set up, moved into the house, stuff like that. And then they took off back to Pennsylvania because my son was in kindergarten at that time. That's when, I bought a Harley. I was living in Temecula. I bought a Harley Davidson. I was coming home one night. And while I was coming home, I just got smoked by, somebody not paying attention on my motorcycle. I got really boogered up. And I'm not sure, Chief, if you said it was a combat injury or what. It was actually, I've never actually been injured in combat, thank God. So all my injuries, I think that's what makes the story kind of crazy, is like, was from a motorcycle accident. So my left leg is a limb salvage. I have 2 titanium rods in it. Basically your hip or your pelvis on the left side, there's a thing called an acetabulum. I have 8 screws and 2 plates in that. I had to get a bone graft a year later. I had a ruptured diaphragm, bleeding in the brain. I mean, pretty boogered up. From what I was told, I died 3 times on the operating table. I got my last rites read to me by a priest or a chaplain. I'm not entirely sure at the time. I was pretty boogered up and pretty drugged up on morphine. But for some reason, I just kept high spirits, made jokes about things, kind of found the silver lining and everything. So I got moved from Balboa Naval Hospital to Scripps Encinitas for my physical therapy and recovery. And at that point, I was good. Like I had to keep my legs straight. Couldn't do a whole lot of moving around, but like I started to like get up and get myself in a wheelchair. And then it was wheelchair to crutch, or wheelchair to like walker, and then walker to crutches. And then pretty much when I was on crutches, like I'm pretty positive all the physical therapists and all the nurses scooting around were ready to get rid of me because I just wouldn't sit still. I got kicked out of the gym one time because I was doing pull-ups. And they told me I couldn't be in there because it was a liability, that if I got injured again and nobody was there like doing actual physical therapy, it would be on them. So then I got yelled at once more by them for taking all the dumbbells, the whole dumbbell rack from the gym into my room so I could work out. And then they're like, "What the hell are you doing?" I was like, "Well, you told me I couldn't go to the gym, so I just brought the gym to my room." And then I went back, and as soon as I could, I got back to work. I went back to the MLG. I was the basic machine gun course chief. I helped set up fires course for like extremis CAS and then basic call for fire to help out. So I worked at CSTS, which is Combat Skills Training School, over there at first MLG. After a short amount of time, or well, not a short amount of time, after about a year. So I had worked for like a year at MLG, like even with my injuries, like I would still hobble my broke butt in there and do my job. But inevitably, because I still needed a bone graft, I got moved down to Wounded Warrior Battalion. So at Wounded Warrior Battalion, I'll be honest, it was phenomenal. Like the things that they do down at Wounded Warrior Battalion for you know, a lot of people have this misconception that it's like you have to be combat, you know, wounded, or you had to get injured in training or deployment or something like that. No, those guys, like Wounded Warrior Battalion, is there to help you with a plethora of things, whether it's just, you know, mental, psychological, physical, emotional, like you name it, sky's the limit. And Wounded Warrior Battalion really does a bang up job at setting, you know, individuals or Marines up for, you know, the transition out of service back into like normal civilian life. Like
Yeah,
I've not, I
93% will transition out from Wounded Warrior Battalion West. You're in the 8% that decided to bypass that surgery out of the
yeah,
Marine Corps.
I'm in, I'm part of the 8% that probably should have had my brain examined a little bit harder. So, so Chief kind of let the dog out of the bag there. So I went through the whole IDES process, and I'll be honest with you, the whole reason I even went through the whole process is because I was told that if I went back to duty, once the ball starts rolling for that, if I went back to duty sooner than like I received a rating, I would forfeit being able to claim the injury that I had that was what I was put there in the first place for. So, you know, any rational person would be like, there's no way I'm forfeiting this injury because like I have to carry this around for the rest of my life. So I went through the whole IDES process. I actually took a trip to Australia and competed in, you know, a 14K run. It's the City of Surf race. I worked out and I got back to running and doing everything I possibly could to kind of like build my case of like why I wanted to go back to full duty. And then I stayed current on my knowledge. Like I studied my infantry knowledge. I studied my artillery stuff. And I just stayed good on it, because when it came down to brass tacks and I finally got my rating, it's like, do you accept this? I reminded them that they still owed me a flight if I wanted it to DC. So I went ahead and I put on my best dress and I flew my butt to DC. And it was kind of funny, kind of talking about, you know, 93%, you know, transitions versus 8% goes back to full duty. When I got there, so they assign you a lawyer, and she had my package and everything, and she kind of, they have to tell you like worst case scenario, because a lot of people go there trying to get a higher rating, which is totally understandable because there's a lot of people that probably deserve a higher rating. They just maybe didn't file their paperwork right, or they didn't know what, I don't want to say didn't know what to say, but didn't know how to word their actual issue correctly is what I want to say. So she had my paperwork and she told me that she had to go in and kind of break the ice with the committee that was going to like pass judgment on like what the scenario was. And when she went in there and talked to him, she had come back out. And then I remember a guy coming back out and I overheard him say like, what is this guy thinking? Like, there's no way we're going to give him a higher rating, because on his paperwork that he submitted, he's running, he's passed a PFT, he's passed a CFT, he just did a City to Surf run, he participates in another organization that I support, is the Gallant Few, the Run Ranger Run, which is actually now called the Patriot Challenge, but it's still 565 miles in the month of February. So he was baffled because they see that 93% come in there. They very rarely ever see that 8%. So they kind of, without even thinking, just assumed that I wanted a higher rating. But in reality, all I wanted to do was go back to full duty. And then when my lawyer kind of like stopped the guy and like calmed him down a little bit, she like explained like he doesn't, you know, Mr. Little doesn't want a higher rating. He just wants to go back to full duty. I heard the guy say, well, yeah, absolutely. Like, granted. But I had to go in the room and make it official and everything like that. So I went ahead and did that. But that was exciting to me because I kind of got to hear the result before I actually had to go stand in front of the board. So when I went in front of the board, I was super relaxed. Like, I wasn't nervous about anything. Like, I wasn't thinking about worst case scenario or outcome. So yeah, I got everything I got everything that I wanted. I got back from DC. I still had a little bit of time at Wounded Warrior Battalion. Then I received orders. I got orders to 11th Marines. I went over there, and again, it was kind of like going to 10th Marines. It was a short stint, and then I got yoked up to go be the fires chief. Kind of based on my background and my performance, it was kind of like a by name request to go over and support the 15th MEU as their fires chief on this last MEU that I went on, my fifth deployment as a Marine. So we went on what we call the COVID cruise. So COVID's, plaguing the world, and we're quarantined and we're away from our families, and we went out on ship, and we're still wearing masks on ship unless you're sitting down eating or in the gym or doing some type of, physical activity. That MEU, I mean, it was a nice way to close out my Marine Corps career. But it was kind of bittersweet because although I had done exactly what I told myself I was going to do, and I was going to deploy once more, it wasn't as wild or crazy as like everything I had done in the past. And I was kind of looking for that like last real hurrah. It was a good deployment. I just didn't really get that. So I made the conscious decision to leave the active duty ranks.
Wait, real quick, talk about you got sent back because you had a possible reaction or possible connection to somebody who had COVID, but that was a total misguided situation. But you got sent back to Camp Pendleton for a couple months.
Not a couple months, 21 days. So almost, just under a month. So when I was on the ship, it's
a good story.
The Navy did a really good job at just trying to mitigate everything that could possibly happen, or anything that could possibly happen. So literally, if you sneezed wrong, or if you got a false positive, or whatever the case was, like if you were within arm's reach of that person, like you were getting your butt kicked off the ship. So my rack mate actually tested positive for it, although he had no symptoms. And I actually had to go get him, which again kind of puts me at jeopardy because I'm the one that went and got him. And then when I went down to drop him off, they're like, "You're not going anywhere." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "You were his rack mate and you just were with him, like walking, like you get to go on vacation for 21 days. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "I'm one of one. Like, I'm the fires chief for the MEU. Like, we're in the middle of a fires exercise. Like, this is not a wise idea." And all I got was like, "Shut your mouth. Like, you're getting off the boat." So it was quick. So I got off the boat and I got put quarantine for, 21 days. And then once the coast was clear, I got sent back to the ship and we kind of pressed on from there. It was just super random because I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I've been tested like 7 times. Like, I'm tested negative. But at that time, it was so like in your face. It was all over the media. It was being scrutinized heavily. The mask thing was being like enforced like to the T. So I really didn't have a dog in the fight when I tried to like talk my way into staying on the boat. Luckily, technically, we weren't even deployed at that time. What we did is we quarantined for, I want to say 21 days before we did our final shipboard exercise. And we did that because when we did our final shipboard exercise, we just deployed from there. We never went back to San Diego. So our deployment, we can argue that it was 6 months long, but really it was kind of a little bit longer than that. I mean, if you factor in like the quarantine period and then the shipboard exercise for a month and then the actual deployment. So it was wild. It like that whole scenario, the way that all played out, it just got crazy fast. But yeah, I finished up that MEU again, super successful. Nothing really happened. We did a little bit of time in Kuwait. Well, we went to Somalia, then we did a little bit of time in Kuwait. And then we kind of had like onesies and twosies kind of floating all over the place. Not a whole lot of port visits. And the port visits we did get were mostly quarantined to like, beer on the piers, stuff like that. Kind of unlike, two of my other mews where we actually got to go enjoy some of the countries we went to. But I came back, and then I had about 3 months to get out of the Marine Corps. So I think the best advice I can give to anybody is like, the sooner you know what you're going to do, immediately start planning. So again, I'm one of those unique scenarios where I had 3 months to get out. I managed to front load as much as I humanly could in like a 2-week span. So like the last, 2.5 months of my time, kind of closing out my California time, was just, relaxing, paddleboarding, enjoying the ocean, and just kind of hanging out, having a good time. Because I was able to get all my travel stuff figured out. I kind of played devil's advocate by pitting the Marine Corps and the Army against each other. But where this story comes full circle back to like why my heart's in the infantry is because I had a Marine Corps recruiter trying to get me an artillery unit, and I was talking to the Army National Guard, and they threw out the fact that I could go back to the infantry. And the moment they said that, I just kind of like, my whole mindset changed. I was like, I will absolutely do that. Like, I would love, if I'm going to do it part-time, like I've worked with everybody, the struggle's real everywhere. And it gave me an opportunity. Plus I got to go do something different. So I'm an 11 Bravo, which at 11 Bravo kind of covers a wide, range of infantry, specialties. It's basically an infantryman, but like well-rounded, cross-trained infantryman in the Army. And then your 11 Charlie is, your mortarmen, like your heavy guns, like tows, stuff like that. So I'm actually a squad leader now for a team of dismounts, basically a machine gun team of dismounts on a Bradley, down at the 1 and 120th in Whiteville, North Carolina. So that's actually where my duty station is, although I'm in Pennsylvania. So that worked out really good. But that's kind of where it all ties back to, like, you got to seize the opportunity, figure out what you want, and just kind of go for it. Like, don't ever let anybody tell you can't do something. Like, anything's possible. I'm not even supposed to have a leg, let alone be able to do what I do. And I think a lot of that had to do with the simple fact that I just refused to give up. Like, everybody told me, take care of yourself, take care of your body. Doctors are like, hey, you're probably going to lose it someday. And I was like, the moment the doctor told me I'm probably going to lose my leg someday, just because it, was so injured, I was like, you know what, if you're telling me I'm going to lose it someday, I'm going to use the shit out of it right now, like, while I still got it. So, and then as far as like the transition out of active duty ranks, I think for any branch of service, I think this would help anybody. Like I said, lean into your stuff, ask questions. Like, if you don't know how to do something, like there's either a veteran that went before you, or there is a civilian just dying to help you. Go be humble, like be humble about, the transition, and ask for help and ask questions. Because I can tell you right now, outbound IPAC is going to give you a checklist, and you're going to show up 6 times, and each time they're going to add something to that checklist that wasn't on their original checklist. So you just got to be proactive with that stuff. Just don't get upset, stay humble. Every time they send you to basically be a runner to go get something else, just go do it. Because I was only out of the Marine Corps, or out of active duty, for a month before my VA kicked in. And I can tell you right now, I know people that have waited 6, 7, 8 months for their VA to kick in, because they waited to the last possible second to do anything. And then they're trying to file a claim by themselves where they don't have access to their old military records. That's another thing. Make copies of everything. Because I can tell you right now, even my Army record right now is pretty messed up. It's basically like, in the Marine Corps, you have MOL, and the Army, you have a different program, but it's basically the same thing. I'm still learning the lingo and the new acronyms and stuff like that. But it's almost like I didn't do anything while I was in the Marine Corps, because they don't have a record of it. I have hard copy records but they need to see your hard copy certs for all your awards, all that stuff. They need a hard copy medical record. They need a hard copy dental record, to basically build your identity as a United States service member. And it was kind of crazy because it's called the Marine to Guard program. It's not much of a program. It's just kind of like you sign the dotted line, you show up, and then like you start chipping away at said checklist again, trying to basically rebuild what you once were. But I can tell you right now, there's a lot of people that get out and they don't even think about like making copies of their MOL or anything. And then they do the same thing I did. They go over to the Army or they go to the Air Force or a different branch of service, and then they scramble to, figure out how to prove this information existed. Because I'm telling you, when you leave the Marine Corps, they're going to give you a few days and then they're going to hit the magic button and you're going to disappear like you were never there. Like that's just the way it works. And if you haven't made copies, and that is the one time I will always tell people, like, while you're in the Marine Corps, like, it's about your men or, your girls, it doesn't matter. It's about your Marines. When you are transitioning out, 110%, it is about you. Take care of you, because you've earned it. You've done, what you had to do. Hopefully we all get honorable discharges, and we can move on with our life. But like, you have to humble yourself. You have to remind yourself you did something that very few people in the world ever do. And you've seen things that very few people in the world will ever see. That is your one time where you are allowed to be, selfish but humble, but be selfish and take care of yourself, because that is all going to set you up for the next chapter, whether it's to, transition out and just go work a civilian job or a federal job, or stay in a reserve like me because I want my 20. I invested 13 years active duty. And then again, too, I'm playing a weird game. So I have 13 active. I need 7 more in the reserves to rate a reserve retirement. However, I'm not going to stop there. If the Army National Guard will allow me to stay even longer, I will activate 5 more times on active orders, and I will still be able to get a 20-year active duty retirement. It's just a weird way of playing it. But then you can subtract time. Like there's a little bit of math involved, but you can subtract active duty years from, retirement age as a reservist. It's like a 1-for-1. So I could honestly still retire, 3 years after I would have originally, if I would have stayed a full 20. And I'm currently working a full-time job. Like I got out and I kind of went back to the blue collar grassroots that I grew up in. I'm a pipe fitter, welder, fabricator at a place in Reynoldsville, Pennsylvania, Star Distributing. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun. All the guys I work with are super down to earth. Reynoldsville, it's like I was talking to some friends the other day. If you never stopped in this town, you'd never know there was anything here. You just keep on driving straight through. But I'm telling you, in the past 3 weeks that I've been here, I've met so many people, and so many people with so much knowledge. I actually was sitting at a bar the other day, and I was sitting next to a guy. He had a big old Grizzly Adams beard and 0341 tattooed down his forearm. And I was like, "Hey man, you a mortarman?" He was a mortarman with, who was he with? I want to say 1-5. I think he was with 1-5. So I was like, "Man, that's cool." So I basically shared the same story that I'm telling you, like right now. They're out there. Like, we're all over the United States. Take care of one another when you run into them. Reach out to people you knew. Don't ever let anybody kind of sit and ponder alone. Like, and that kind of leads us into Warrior Built. When I was at Wounded Warrior Battalion, I met a guy. His name is Brandon Grove. Brandon Grove was there with me. Brandon Grove, he's a big old squishy face kind of guy, but heart of gold. He brought it up to me, found out I like cars, and I went up there once and I met Chief for the first time. And then Chief like grilled me. He's like, "Prove to me you have a car." So I did. I produced the car, and then I was kind of in. And I, going up there for the warrior groups, just sharing the story and making friends and realistically at the end of the day, kind of like in my own words, like I look at Warrior Built as like a camaraderie. Like you share a common interest, uh, a common ground with people around you, and you kind of motivate each other to do stuff, whatever that may be. Like maybe it's just talk, or Warrior Built's big on dune buggy racing and dirt bike racing, and being actively involved with the community, and um, doing a lot of volunteer work and setting stuff up, and it's just a good time. It's a great organization for those combat veterans to just kind of, it's a nice outlet. And it doesn't matter. Like I'm here in Pennsylvania and I still reach back to Chief, and I reach back to Brandon, and I reach back to the other guys, and if we cross paths again, or I come out there, or they're over here, I know I saw a message the other day, Fogarty, Brian, he was in Pennsylvania. So I'm assuming, yeah, I'm assuming he's probably from Pennsylvania.
He is.
Yeah. So there you go. He might be in California right now, but he's a Pennsylvania boy too. So, if you run into one of your brothers out there, don't leave him hanging. Say what's up, and don't ever leave anybody behind. Don't ever let anybody sit in silence. So take care of one another.
Yeah, great stuff, Chris. You're involved with all kinds of nonprofit orgs. You're involved in your life. You've never came across as a victim, even though you could have taken that route. And really, you're always pushing for a better place. You're a battle buddy to a lot of guys. You're always helping things out. So keep up the great work. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, they definitely can do it through me.
Absolutely.
My information's in the show notes. Some of his, feel free to reach out to me. But any last final words?
I would just say, no matter what happens in your life, it's your life. As an individual, if you have a family, take care of your family, make them number one. Number two, always take care of yourself. And then no matter what happens, how it happens, good or bad, always look forward and find the silver lining in everything you do, because sometimes people can't see it just because they haven't opened their eyes yet. And if you need to be the one to remind somebody to open their eyes so they can see it, be that person instead. So I guess that would be my final words. Absolutely, Chief. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Hey, this is Combat Vet Vision. This is obviously a place where we get to unload a lot of different things, give you some knowledge, some of our input, our opinions, whatever that might be. And maybe some of it will resonate with you and give you some opportunities to maybe reflect on yourself and move forward in a more positive direction. But until next time, hey, strength and honor. This is Aaron Siebert signing off. Out.